Good evening. Welcome to the WLR Entrepreneurs Exchange podcast. It's good to see you. So I think one of the interesting things at the moment, we're kind of sat here and I was chatting to a corporate lawyer actually the other day, and we're having a conversation that actually we're probably in a period where first time in 30 or 40 years, the impact of a budget is going to be off the scale. Yeah. But it's also really unusual to not have it quite clearly seen what's coming. It doesn't matter what political party you support, you follow. We can already see that from very loose manifestos that were clearly designed to allow people plenty of latitude in what's going to happen with the budget. But I think also it's a case of, well, there's so many potential variables. Personally, I think the way that Rachel Reeves' speech on 31st of July kind of set a tone, because we straight in with some pretty heavy commentary around the winter fuel allowances and VAT on school fees. But it was the forestalling measures that were dropped out. Well, as of midnight tonight, we're going to introduce this. And so it kind of, for me personally anyway, and for a lot of people I've spoken to, has really changed the landscape a little bit now. There's, gloves off, and it doesn't matter whether you support or you fight vehemently against and are disappointed in it. I think the behaviour is unfortunate, would be my view, but I think some would see it as necessary, and I think we have to keep quite open. Fortunately, we're not part of the BBC, so we don't have to be neutral. We can express our entire views. But I thought it was really interesting that as we're coming up to this budget, we're in such an unusual position. I mean, the easiest one, capital gains tax. Mm-hmm. We've got a position where, so you've got two pieces to it as I see it. I don't know what you guys think. There's the what was the entrepreneurs tax relief, the business asset disposal relief, effectively 10% for the first million for the qualifying shareholder, and then returns to a normal capital gains going over there. Looks like that's going. It's already been played with. I mean, it was brought in to really encourage investment, entrepreneurship, people to grow businesses, and all the benefits for an economy that growing businesses. I mean, you look at our group of businesses that we've been building over recent years, and we've got over 60 people now employed from scratch. That's what happens when you grow business. You create employment, you create taxes behind that, you create opportunity. But of course, if they're removing something like that, that's got to raise some questions. We'll have a chat in a minute about where you might see the capital gains tax regime shift to, maybe the alignment for income tax. But I'm just quite interested in your views on what's the real problem or benefit, being neutral, of removing that entrepreneurs relief, as it's easier to refer to, of that 10%. For me, it's quite a worrying piece.
Do you want to go first?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head with the word worry. A lot of business owners are worried about how they get the value out of their business that they've worked very hard to grow, maybe get to a position to sell, that they've previously been able to take the 10% tax advantage up to that million. It was 10 million many moons ago.
Yeah. I remember the days.
But I think with the budget coming up, the government really want to align the capital gains with income tax, and entrepreneurs relief is something that they feel that it's something to remove pretty quickly, and it wouldn't require much change in legislation. So it's a quick win, a nice bit of a policy, along with the VAT on school fees, and it placates their electorate basically.
Right, and it's interesting on that, because, and I think this will be a theme as we chat over the coming days and weeks together, and with customers, colleagues, and other people within the industry and the professional sector. I wonder whether a lot of the commentary that's coming out of government is, well, people with the broadest shoulders have got the burden, and businesses.
We're talking about wealth taxes as well, and that goes into your capital gains of thinking, right, okay, the ones with the broader shoulders take the biggest tax burden, which sounds brilliant in their news snippets.
And that's what's interesting, because I'd be interested for other people's opinions, but we're talking to a lot of people, and we're hearing this broaded shoulders, and we're here for the workers, and businesses should. But 99% of the UK is SME and micro entities.
Mm-hmm.
The businesses that are going to suffer most are the ones that don't have the broadest shoulders. And I think, again, I'm trying not to make this about the politics. I'm trying to make it about the honest view and what we think, what we think might happen. What can we do now? What can we do on the run up? What do we think the landscape looks later? But of course, one of the challenges is as SME owners, we're the ones that have been targeted as having the broadest shoulders. I'm not entirely convinced we and our clients and our colleagues in the SME and micro entity sector do have those broad shoulders, and that kind of leads me to that. What can we do? Because it's a worrying time when that goes. And let's not kid ourselves here. As business owners, our business is our pension.
Mm.
So when you listen to the Labour peer who merrily said that he doesn't understand what the fuss is about because he doesn't know of any entrepreneurs who have built their business worrying about how much tax they're going to pay on the exit, blew my mind, because of course as business owners, the vast majority, it's our pension. So of course we care about that. So if we've got that going on and we have that fear, what do we think that's going to do this side of the budget? Because at the moment we're not talking about whether the capital gains is going to go up per se in alignment with income tax, but just this side of the budget and also post budget, were that to be the piece.
Yeah. Well, look, I get massively frustrated with this sort of people with the broad shoulders, because I think the media portrays to the general electorate that it's all these people that are earning 20, 30, 40 million a year. They've got businesses that are worth hundreds of millions. That's not, as you say, the majority of the UK business sector, right? And, when you look at your classic entrepreneur, set up a small or medium business, they're working it for 30, 40 years, and there's always been an incentive to get out at the right time. And a huge part of that, and it's not tax avoidance or evasion or anything like that, a huge part of that is how much they're going to get in their pocket, right? When they retire or part retire, or they sell it to the kids or the management team. And, for me, if somebody's going to sell their business for 2-3 million quid, and at the minute, depending on how that's structured, they could be paying 10% on that if it's owned with a wife or family member, that sort of thing. Well, if you're selling for 2 million between husband and wife, and you're putting 1.8 in your pocket, that will get you through probably your retirement, allow you to invest, allow you to maybe employ others as you go forward into the sort of latter years. But that versus £1 million, there'll be a lot of people that are in public sector, they've got that state pension that would sit at that sort of level, if not more, generating greater returns. So, I think the incentivization, some of which is tax driven, to allow business to build succession into their plans and do it at the right times. There'll be people now that can't afford to retire and sell and move on. So I think it'll have a detrimental impact on succession of business, continual employment. And it'll be interesting for all those people that, rather than put their money into pensions, have built an asset that's employed people, has paid tax of all sorts of taxes. They've taken the risk, and suddenly their pension pot in their world is effectively going to halve.
Yeah. So let's take that point, and it's a worry. However, it is what it is. So on the basis that the three of us are not going to be asked to advise and rewrite Rachel Reeve's budget in time, and so we're not going to get what we like to see. Let's assume, for the purposes of this conversation, let's assume that they're just going to remove the business asset disposal relief, the entrepreneurs relief. So let's assume that we're going in, we are facing in a matter of weeks the removal of the 10% tax relief, and it's just going to go to 20%.
And if they do that, I suspect it will be 12 o'clock. That night. And
history tells us from the recent piece that they'll put the anti-forestalling measures in, and it will be where it will be. So what do we do? Because we can wax lyrical about the what ifs and maybes. But so let's make the assumption that first piece is going to happen. They're not going to hike in line with income tax. They're just going to remove that. What you're saying is that, so the two, let's say it's a husband and wife, two directors. So it's 2,200,000 today.
Yep.
That then becomes 2 million sale, 400,000 tax. So the minimum that people in business are going to feel at that moment is a 200 grand swing overnight in their tax piece.
Yeah, sure.
That's tough, isn't it? Is that just, you got to live with it? Because if we think it's coming, there's not a lot you can do now. We're only a matter of weeks or whatever away.
Yep.
I guess you got to live with that.
Well, I guess if you look at all those sorts of things that are time sensitive in tax world, like private businesses making sure that they pay into their corporate SASs and SIPs before the year end to get the tax relief in the company.
Yeah.
What's it going to do? The natural position, if you're looking at succession or retiring, is you're going to accelerate that date at which you pay tax, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're selling for those sorts of numbers, then 10% of that has a big impact on what you've got left in your pocket. And we say 10%, it could be an extra 40% tax that you're paying, right?
Yeah.
So at that point you probably can't afford to retire. So what would I be doing in my business? I'd be accelerating those strategic thoughts I already had in terms of getting out, and I'd be looking for an exit before my tax rate doubles or triples or quadruples.
Yeah. Who knows? Yeah. And so if you sold for $1 million between now and 30th of October, and that £100,000 tax bill will then be due in the following January 26th. So you're bringing forward that potential tax liability, but you're probably halving it or maybe more, depending on what they do.
And I think you've just got to be, you might have been building your, what you talk about the Labour bill that said, who on earth gets into business to sell it? There's many sort of strategic academic commentators that say the complete opposite. So who's right, who's right, who's wrong, right?
Yeah.
But there's a business life cycle, and when you've reached the peak, you either go again or you get out. Somebody else takes it forward.
And I think that's really interesting. There's a comment by Mike Cherry, who's the chairman of the FSB, and he talked about just the mere act of removing the relief for entrepreneurs, and his words, not mine, would make a mockery of the idea that it still makes sense to set up in a business. He talks about this decision to remove that, which is, we know is going to be key, be an incredibly damaging way of telling anyone that's considering an investment or whatever in their business not to worry about it. And you kind of sit back and you think, couldn't have put truer words. And I think if you take that principle and we take about the fact this is coming, there's an element of what you're saying there, Mike, is, well, hang on a second, it might be a foregone conclusion that it's coming, but that doesn't mean there's not opportunities to deal with things now. So I remember, as we've had conversations on previous podcasts, one of the big messages that always comes across to me is, look, the best opportunities for tax efficiency for an individual is just using all the tax rules correctly. Don't worry about these strategies, phoning Jimmy Carr up, asking him for his tax advice, and these way out things. Actually, just use the tax rules for the purpose they were invented for, but make sure you optimise them. And I guess that point about
and use us as well. Use your accountants, use your advisors to make sure you will understand those rules. So you use it. Exactly.
And don't just assume that because you've had a conversation, that's what it is.
Well, I disagree. I agree with you, but there's a belief that if you go and see an accountant and they've got some letters after the name that you're going to be in the best efficient tax position that you could be. We know that
not always the case.
That's rarely the case. There's always something that your, I don't want to say bog standard accountant. There's always something that your atypical accountant won't do, and we say a lot. You get the letters after your name, you get the qualifications, but it's the University of Life and Experience that allows you to, in our world, advise about real life situations.
Absolutely. How many times have we spoken to a young person, said, passing your driving test, that's when you start learning how to drive.
Yep.
And I think it's the same with professional qualifications.
Exactly right.
And if you think, as we're building businesses, we're working together, you're bringing the host of that sort of experience together. When I've chatted to accountants before, or to customers, one of the things you do sometimes see is a one size fits all.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I did this on this person's tax return,
Yep.
so I'm going to roll it out here. And when you talk about, well, just make sure you maximise the tax rules that are there in place, the natural response is yes, because make sure you've got some money against your home office.
Yep.
Have you got your mileage correctly claimed for? All of which are entirely appropriate, but my goodness, are they so far missing the point of that?
Exactly what Mike's saying. It's not just that; it's the strategic element as well of
Yeah.
bringing everything together along with the tax and your own goals. And
You can talk to clients about, sticking in use of home at £5 a week, or a few mileage claims and that sort of thing. But then you compare that with the biggest asset they will ever have in terms of what they're building. Those bits and pieces on a yearly basis, which are important, fade into sort of insignificance. We start looking at the capital positions of their life, right? And then, the best advice we give isn't necessarily the accounting bit. It's the all-encompassing life strategic position as to what ultimately is their biggest asset, which is the business.
Yeah, and that's about separating out as a quite often. The business owner, you trust your accountant. Sometimes, unfortunately, and there's lots of accountants out there that listen to this and they'll smile and go, yeah, I know people like that. There's some accountants who just put business advisor on the end of their job title or their business. And because they're an accountant doesn't make them a business person. Very good in the areas they should be. And we work with lots of accountants, as you know, and quite often we'll be chatting to them and go, yeah, I know 3 or 4 people like that. But of course, as a business owner, I'm going to kind of trust. And that's where we get limited. And I think when we talk about, so we go back to this point about the broader shoulders carrying the burden, there's lots of business owners out there. We're going, yeah, but they're the ones that don't pay any tax because they've got all these really bright people. And actually, all the bright people they've got, they're just using tax laws in the most effective and efficient way. And surely, though, the problem I have as a small business owner is I can't benefit from that because they're massive corporates and the structures and strategies you put into place, that works for them. It's not going to work for me. Is that a fair challenge?
Well, again, my frustrations, we do a lot of, I'm trying to think of a good example. We do a lot of research and development tax claims that are bona fide R&D tax relief claims for super clever individuals and companies that are developing new technology, new products, that sort of thing, and have a proper R&D claim. When people, in the media talk up the fact that people like Rolls-Royce or I was going to say Google, Amazon, obviously Ireland have got in trouble this week, haven't they, for advantageous tax rates? But the reason people like that Rolls-Royce are paying very little, no tax, is because they're spending billions and billions of pounds a year on research and development, and those rules apply to the guy that's got a workshop around the corner that's developing the next helium fueled bike or whatever it might be, and I get angry on a daily basis that the media sort of puts out there. Well, firstly, the media puts out there that these things aren't things that should be taken, but also, if I can say, HMRC. The easiest strategy for HMRC on things like that is to make people think that it's something that's not. That's and
not, because there was some noise around some fraudulent claims. It's chucking out that there's no smoke without fire on every claim.
Exactly,
and
right.
That's clearly not the case.
And everybody gets that brown envelope with four letters on the front, and they all panic and crumble, right? Which isn't where people need to be. As long as they're confident that what they're actually doing and they're behaving in the correct way is that they're applying the correct rules. There's some great rules out there if you know how to apply them that are in your favour. You've just got to have the knowledge and the experience of knowing what they are.
And I guess it's interesting that as we talk about how these larger organisations benefit from a stronger position when it comes to their tax and what they pay. You've got the tax reliefs, which we've talked about earlier,
Yep.
R&D, or whatever it may be. But also there's quite a lot of things that happen that in my world, I'm thinking, yeah, but I'm not a massive group structure. You know, I've got a nice business turning over. We often talk, you know, using the example, I make tables. It's you know, I perhaps turn over a couple of million quid doing that, and I'm really good at it. I'm a single business. I don't get the benefit that I can see happens when someone's got multiple structures and multiple companies and stuff. So I'm not going to get anywhere near those opportunities, which is quite unfortunate, isn't it?
You're not going to get near the opportunity?
Yeah.
You might not get near the opportunity, but if you don't get near it, you're just talking to the wrong person.
Okay, interesting.
You know, it's you know, I say a lot. You know, I'm an accountant by sort of train, not by intuition, and I've always found that you know, understand the proper business position, the people behind the business, and then you can really start. You move away from the tax tail wagging the corporate dog. You move away worrying about the sort of HMRC position. You move away from worrying about picking the little bits and pieces of opportunity out of saving a little bit of tax, and you know, do the right thing, apply the right rules, behave correctly, and quite frankly, in the British regime, you're quite in a bona fide position. You're not going to pay huge amounts of tax. You've just got to know how to structure things and do things in the right way.
So I guess what you're saying then is actually a large part of that is how we produce our corporate structure as a business. Because I think when we use the word corporate as an SME owner, that's the biggest, that's the banks, that's the so and so. And actually we're not. We're talking about what is a corporate entity. The corporate entity in as we're talking is my limited company. Whether I'm turning over 150 grand, 150 million is irrelevant. That's the piece. So I guess what you're saying is, well, every corporate entity has the right to benefit from structures that are in place in the rules, in the regulations, and it's probably I'm really good at running my business, and I make the best whatever I make, and my customer service is brilliant, and I do all these things. I just need to speak to the expert about the corporate structuring, don't I?
Yeah, absolutely. We think these things are all sort of past our world, our experience, our knowledge. The example I always give is, you know, that's the typical entrepreneur says, and I would say in 30 years being a senior partner in an international accounting practice, my wealthiest clients, bar none, were kicked out of school at 13, bar none. And so, and why they're wealthy? Because they've had to graft and learn and keep going. So when you look at your typical entrepreneur that set up a business, probably like, you know, so I've always been professional practice. You've had your own corporate trading businesses. When those people set the business up, typically they'll have done it with a bit of help from mum and dad. And the typical accountant, I'd say, would go, right, you've set up a company, you've got no idea where that's going to get to, take 100% of the shareholding for yourself. And then, you know, trade as you trade, hopefully earn a lot of money, hopefully pay the right amount of tax, and you've got a good asset later on. Now, you know, there's an opportunity that, well, why not give your parents some shares? Because they've helped you, they might have, you know, lent you some money to fund your working capital. Why not give mum and dad? So every new company you set up, why not give your mum and dad 10 shares? And you're probably in your 20s and they're probably in their late 40s, early 50s. 20 years down the line, when you've made money and mum and dad have sat there as a typical investor, and they're saying, do you know what, we don't need these shares, we don't need our dividend income anymore. We'd really like to give something to the grandchildren. Well, you know, there are perfectly straight structures out there where they can settle into trust income generating assets and start paying dividends to the grandchildren. Now, unless you know your stuff, unless you're looking 10, 15, 20 years ahead, those opportunities don't exist. But they're completely vanilla, and actually probably more truly follow on the setup of a new company and what that should look like than you know, 99% of the ones that are set up.
That's really interesting because that kind of resonates for a lot of people, and the accountant who put business advisor on their job title or on their sign is not telling me that. Hey, look, I know mine didn't when in the very first business I set up. I know, and my accountants were fairly large regional players.
Yep.
Bright people. Not even once did someone say, hang on a second, if you do something this way now, it provides lots of opportunities here.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
And I guess then what happens is people try and unravel it.
Yeah.
Now, that's a really interesting point, and I think it's a really good opportunity for me to say, look, thanks, guys. We've started a conversation about what's going on as we're leading up to the budget. And if you think about what we're talking about, unless you tell me otherwise, there's actually some stuff we can do now as business owners, this side of the budget.
Yep.
There's actually a load of stuff that we should be doing, irrespective of the budget and thinking about going forward,
Yep.
that are just about how to run a corporate entity in the best way possible,
Yep.
with the right advisors around you. And it kind of opens your eyes a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Look, I'm going to leave you guys to it. Thanks for that. I really appreciate it. There's a couple more conversations I think I'd like to kind of have if you guys have got some time over the coming days and weeks. So let's see where we go with that.
Sounds good.
Thank you.